I'll go through the answers first. I'll give you a single word, recognizing I don't expect that you gave me these things word for word. You're not little robots. I get it. You're people. You interpret things, and your brain stores things as an interpreted memory rather than verbatim. So.
Oh, were these the things on the test?
Mm-hmm. So, our postulates, the things that we should know that we've seen before, would be things like every species has variations within its members. You could say that however you need to say it. That those variations must be heritable. There were specific questions in the packet that said, why would natural selection not work on things that aren't heritable? How do they, or it has to affect fitness. Affect fitness can be good or affect fitness can be bad. It can be something good, it can be something bad. And there were other options that I would appreciate and understand you saying, like, all of these things are true, because most often what happens is 1 and 2 get mushed together into 1, and then 3 becomes 2, and then 4 becomes 3, if that makes sense. So there is some kind of change in the environment that applies a selective pressure. So if you said environmental change or selective pressure, I would understand that. Just because I know we have a tendency to panic, it is not looking at that box. The way I've graded it so far is putting check pluses, check minuses, X's, and circles. And I'll go back and look at that box and look for an overall understanding of the concepts. If it were graded the way that you expect I'm going to grade it, which is what most students do, is say there are 6 boxes, every box is worth a point, or there are 3 answers, and every one of the 3 is worth a point. That means if you missed one of those boxes, you're automatically at a 66%. That seems a little bit extreme. So the way I'm going to look at it is go back through, look at the smiley faces, X's, check marks, check pluses, underlined circles, and if it looks to me like you're, 85% of the way there, then I'll be like, yeah, you're at about an 85% of this concept, you're grasping it, and that's what your grade in that box would be. So it's not going to be like, for lack of a better way to put it, a bloodbath, because I'm sure there are some of you who were expecting that.
What's variations in?
There are variations, so there are differences. There are traits that are different. So in the picture you guys looked at, there was one pokey one that made you say ouch when you looked at it, and there was one non-pokey one that you were like, oh, that one looks much softer. Those are variations within a species. Just like height, hair color, eye color, any of those things. The last question on there really could probably be answered just in one fell swoop. I'm fairly certain somebody who answered it very well earlier made up some words, but I liked their answer, so I'll just repeat it, even though I'm pretty sure there's some made up words in that sentence. Survival of the fittest is often interpreted by people to mean leanest, fastest, smartest, cleverest. Pretty sure that's made up. And a couple of other ists. That's not what survival of the fittest means. Survival of the fittest simply would mean that those best suited to their environment are the ones who survive. Fitness is biologically those who are able to survive and reproduce. It's essentially your answer. If you made up words, if it was the correct answer and they were words that I understand why you made it up, yeah, okay, I'm fine with that. That's kind of where we're at there. I was hoping that you'll notice that this list was bolded and mentioned twice in the packet easily, perhaps a third time. And then we'd already gone through all the postulates, and those postulates were a Bell question earlier this week. So they have come back to haunt us. Those of you who are panicking, again, I'm going to look at your paper and know automatically who knew what they were talking about and who was making it up as they went. That's not difficult for me to read. So if you're one of those people who are like, hey, I just didn't use those words. I didn't use those words, but that's what I meant. Take a couple deep breaths. It's going to be all right. Let's just leave them there. Who is it? I always feel bad when people feel the need to apologize for interrupting classes. Like, are there other teachers who, when people interrupt them, are like, I love visitors. Why would you do that? I love new people. Whatever. Perfect example of evidence for evolution that we can apply to our 4 postulates to make sure we get them. There are 2 moths in this picture. I know, you're like, no, I see 1. No, really. There's 1, and there's the other. Squint, if you can't see it. Mash your face all up. I don't know how that helps people, but it's apparently what we do when we can't see things. This is what the moth used to look like. This particular moth is called a salt and pepper moth. And the vast majority of the population was predominantly white, but peppered with some darker colors. The variation within the species that existed, so here's postulate 1. The variation was coloration. Some were darker, some were lighter. The trees at the time, at time 0, let's call it, were all like paper birches and aspens. Now, if you guys know what paper birches and aspens look like, their trunks are white and flecked with some darkness. So if you were mostly white, flecked with some peppery darkness, you would blend in beautifully. And when you mated, you would make other moths that looked very similar to you. So it's a heritable trait. They didn't just decide, it was heritable. Something genetic. And that was helpful. It protected them. Their fitness was better because they were able to survive and reproduce, have offspring, until, if you just inserted dun 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 in your head, that's what until means. Until factories were built. When factories were originally built, and we started kind of Industrial Revolution and on, we were not so concerned about the environment. A lot of smog, a lot of pollution, and those lovely white paper birches ended up coated in what was essentially airborne industrial waste. And it made them no longer that pretty white paper birchy bark. Instead, it made them dark and smoggy. And so the moths that looked like this on that dark and smoggy surface essentially would have like a neon sign that said lunch here to any passing bird. Who would be left then in the population?
Black moths. The black moths.
The darker moths?
Yeah.
The darker moths would have been the ones who were left. Now, that doesn't mean that all of those flecked white with some pepper flecks on them moths died. Those that were still in regions protected from the smog, they still lived as they were because their environment didn't change. There was only a selective pressure against being a lighter moth when the environment changed. So there's where you could use your term selective pressure from your quiz. The salt and pepper moths provide you with an example of how natural selection works with our 4 postulates. Those of you who are very concerned about the salt and pepper moths, I know you're just very disheartened. Don't worry, there's no regulation on those factories. The paper birches have gone back to their original color. And for the most part, the salt and pepper moths have slowly been returning to their original lighter variations. So, another fabulous example, what do monarch butterflies look like? Orange and black. Now, I don't know about you, but if I were trying to avoid being eaten, I wouldn't exactly be orange. There's not a whole lot that's, say, subtle about the color orange. If you're going to wear orange, you're pretty confident that you don't care if you get noticed. Now, if you're the kind of thing that gets eaten because you're orange, it would behoove you to have some kind of natural protection then. So you'll notice that things in biology, in the environment that are flashy, tend to also be poisonous. Natural protection. So those orange monarchs, if you've ever seen a bird eat one, it will take a bite of the wing and then immediately vomit. They taste terrible. I don't know, I've never eaten one. There's never been anything about me that's been like, butterfly. Had it on fairly good authority from every bird I've ever seen vomit that they taste bad. You guys have done the same thing, right? There's been foods that you don't like. I'm sure as children, most definitely. You put it in your mouth, like say, I don't know, anchovy, and then right back out it came. That's how the monarch butterfly affords its protection. Now, if you're not poisonous, but you're also a butterfly, it could be helpful if you mimicked the monarch, right? If you, over time, the ones who didn't get eaten were the ones who resembled more closely the monarch butterfly, eventually your non-poisonous, non-icky tasting relatives, that's what you're going to be. It's called mimicry. It's an example of coevolution where species evolve together and one has become a perfect mimic of the monarch butterfly. Birds aren't going to eat something, again, that they recognize that the first time they ate it, it was gross. You do the same thing. If you ate something the first time and it was gross, you're not going to eat it again.